these images paint a damning picture of what's happening, not just in our industry, but across the economy. The rich are getting richer, while the rest of us are getting left behind.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Let's talk about the UAW. UAW, the United Auto Workers Union, have begun bargaining with the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and Stellantis. And they began the bargaining with a bang. We talked about the bargaining as it opened, and we talked about how traditionally the leadership of the UAW began the bargaining session with a president's handshake between the president of the UAW and the CEOs of the big three. And that was this big, kumbaya, team partnership kind of symbolism there. And this time, the new leadership of the United Auto Workers, Shawn, Fain, and the United Auto Workers for Democracy slate, they called it the Members United slate, they did not do that, which I think is very good. They started negotiations with a members handshake. And the international president went to multiple factories and shook hands with members and asked them what they're wanting to see from negotiations. And of course, that's not the only time that they've solicited input from the members. There's been there's been a lot of solicitation from the members about what they want to see in these negotiations, is my understanding. And so that is a much better way to start off negotiations, in my opinion. And that combative, militant attitude that we saw in the run up to and during the negotiations between the Teamsters and UPS. There was much more militant and combative rhetoric, and there was an intentional raising of the expectations of Teamsters members, and that is happening right now with UAW members. And so last week, International President Shawn Fain did a live stream on Facebook and YouTube updating the members about the negotiations and giving an overview of the profits of the big three automakers and comparing that to the state of a current employee at the big three automakers. So let's start off with this clip where Shawn Fain talks about how much money the big three automakers have made over the past decade.
So as you can see, I have some props with me today for this Facebook Live. I want to draw your attention to the first image, which is literally ripped from last week's headlines. The Big Three released their quarterly earnings reports last week, and the companies again are having a blockbuster year. As you can see from these headlines, profits at GM are soaring. Profits at Stellantis are record-breaking, and profits at Ford are surging. Altogether, the Big Three have made a combined bottom-line profit of $21 billion in the first half of 2023. And now they're telling Wall Street their profits for the full year will be billions more than they originally expected. This comes on top of the $250 billion that the Big Three collectively made in North American profits over the last 10 years. So what have the Big Three done with these staggering profits? Instead of rewarding the workers who spent long hours wrecking their bodies on the line to make these profits possible, the Big Three have funneled billions into stock buyback schemes that artificially inflate the value of company shares and further enrich company executives and the top 1%. That's billions of dollars that have been robbed from the workers who made these profits possible. That's billions of dollars that weren't spent on the EV transition. So when the Big Three say the future's uncertain and that the EV transition's expensive, remember that they've made $250 billion in North American profits over the last decade and have poured billions of it into special dividends, stock buybacks, and supersized executive compensation. Our message going into bargaining is clear. Record profits mean record contracts.
There you go. Those are just the facts, right? He's just laying out the facts, and it's important that people understand that, when these companies begin to cry poor at the negotiating table, as they're now coming out and saying, oh, these demands they're too much, they're asking for too much, just remember the historical record of what is going on at these companies in the last 10 years. They're making record profits while the real compensation of employees is going down. And I mean, by the way, I think as consumers, we can see that the quality of the product is going down. Vehicles used to last forever. And now you can, there's a lot of times that you can barely make it to 100,000 miles. And people blame that. I've heard people attempt to blame that on the employees, saying, oh, well, look, the UAW produced cars, they don't last as long as some of the Japanese produced cars like Hyundai or Toyota. And that is so silly, because the UAW workers are not the ones who make the decisions about what materials to use. They're not the ones who decide what designs to go with. They're not the ones doing, that is totally out of what they're doing. That is not within their purview. That is all management's. That is all management prerogative about what is produced and how it's produced and to what quality it's produced. They can only control what they do on the line. So the product quality, absolutely not their fault. But we have seen, we've seen it decline. We've seen it decline. And all of this on the consumer end and on the worker end, declining expectations from these big three automakers while they're making more money than they ever have. Literally more money than they ever have. So remember that when they start to cry poor. And just to illustrate some of what I'm saying about the declining living standards of big three employees, let's play the second clip from Shawn Fain.
While big three executives have used those extreme profits to pump up their pay, our members have fallen further and further behind. This chart compares what our contracts provided in 2007 compared to what they provide today. As you can see here, an auto worker starting at a big three company in 2007 had a higher starting wage than an auto worker starting in 2023. And that's without taking inflation into account. If the 2007 starting rate had kept up with inflation, newly hired big three employees would be making $28.68 in today's wages. That's more than $10 an hour higher than the current rate. That's almost $21,000 more per year. That's a life-changing amount of money that our members have been robbed of. Sorry, I got to take a drink here. But as many of you know, that's not the full story. The starting pay today is even lower for our temporary workers. Ford and GM hire temps at $16.67 an hour. Stellantis hires temps at just $15.78 an hour. That is criminal. In 2007, it took 3 years for a new hire to reach the top rate, back then of $28 an hour. Today, 16 years later, it takes 8 years to reach a top rate of around $32 an hour. Even that top rate is much lower than it should be. During the Great Recession, we lost cost of living adjustments, which made sure that our paychecks kept up with inflation. We won cost of living at General Motors all the way back in 1948. And then when inflation took off in the 1970s, the UAW won cost of living across all of our employers to ensure that our standard of living didn't fall further behind. The big three have come roaring back since the Great Recession, but cost of living, which was suspended then, has not. Prior to 2007, every member at the big three earned a pension and every member received health care when they retired. Today, a majority of our members across the big three automakers are second class of workers who are being denied retiree health care and pensions. When you put these two images together, they paint a damning picture of what's happening, not just in our industry, but across the economy. The rich are getting richer while the rest of us are getting left behind.
And just to add a couple of other statistics, it would take... So one of the issues that they're trying to fight in these negotiations is not only the second tier of workers in the big three automakers, like their kind of standard plants, but also the battery production plants,
right.
Which are in many cases non-union, not all, but in many cases non-union, and even where they are unionized, the employers have not budged, and they are significantly below even the second tier of employees at the standard big three manufacturing plants. And just to illustrate that, a production worker coming off the street working at Ultium, which is a electric battery manufacturer owned by one of the big three, they only make $16 an hour. While the CEO, Mary Barra, I think she is the CEO of GM, she makes $29 million a year.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
It would take an Ultium employee working full-time 16 years to make not what Mary Barra makes in a year, not even what it takes her to make in 6 months, or even 1 month, or even 2 weeks. It would take an Ultium employee 16 years working full-time to make what this CEO makes in 1 week.
Wow.
Insane. Additionally, these companies have closed 65 plants in the last 10 years, and the majority of those plants were not closed during or immediately following the recession. Rather, they were closed in periods of high and record profits for the big three automakers. And so, as a response to all of this, the declining standards of workers, the plant closures, the disrespect that workers face from the big three automakers, they have put out, the UAW has put out, the members' demands. Apparently, they used to call the list of the bargaining priorities that the UAW would present to the big three, they used to call those the president's demands. They're calling them the members' demands this time. And those demands are to eliminate tiers on wages and benefits, give substantial wage increases at 46% over the next 4 years. They want to restore COLA, the cost of living adjustment. They want a defined benefit pension plan for all workers. They want to reestablish retiree medical benefits. They want a right to strike over plant closures. They want a working family protection program, and this is really, really cool. That would mandate that the companies, if they leave, which the workers will have more leverage in the event that they try to leave a plant, if they get all of these bargaining priorities, because they'd have the right to strike over plant closures. But even if the company is able to successfully close a plant, if they're able to get this in the contract, the Working Families Protection Program, it would require the big three automakers to pay UAW members to do community service in the communities that the big three automaker decided to abandon. That is a fantastic idea. They also want to end the abuse of temp workers, drastically reduce the use of temp workers, convert, I think he said, all current temporary employees to full-time employees. They want to significantly increase retiree pay, and they want more paid time off for their families, including a 4-day work week. They want 32 hours of work for 40 hours of pay. And that would be a huge, huge deal. And it is about time that somebody is coming out with this, because if you just look at how much productivity has increased over the since we won the 40-hour work week, think about we produce I don't know how much more it is, but it is like an order of magnitude larger. We produce more value, so much, like 10 times more value than we were producing in an hour back when we won the 40-hour work week. And now we are moving backwards. We're not moving forwards. We're moving backwards instead of having that productivity go into the workers who produce the value. Instead of us taking home, us being able to benefit from the increased productivity, from the increased value that we're making, that's all going into the CEO's pockets. And we are getting the same and in sometimes declining rates of compensation and working more.
Right.
Shawn Fain was talking about how UAW members at Big Three automakers are now working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week. That is, and he said that's not thriving, that's just surviving, and that's absolutely true. And he mentioned, and I thought it was very powerful, how he was in a group in his church, and there was a minister who in that small group at his church who routinely did deathbed consultations. And he said that this minister told the group that he had never, in all of his deathbed consultations, heard anybody say that they wish they had spent more time at work. And in fact, it was very common that people regretted not spending more time with their families. And that's what we're talking about, right? People lose sight of that. People just think about the money when we're talking about how much should people make, how much should people work. They lose sight of the fact that when we work for a company, when we create value for a company, when we create profit for these ghouls and leeches at the top, we are selling our life. That's what it is. We are selling pieces of our life to these people. And they are not respecting that. They are not giving us enough for the value of our life. And that's what they're trying to address here, not only with the increased wages, but I mean, the thing that I'm really most excited about is this push to decrease working hours, because that is so important. And we have really, really lost sight of that as a labor movement and as a society. And we have allowed so much encroachment into what precious little time we have on this earth.
Right.
We have allowed too much of it to be stolen by people making a profit from us.
Yeah, I really agree with you, and I think it's huge that they're including that as a demand, and I so agree with it because, you know, we came close to a 30-hour work week in the 30s. Our movement really aspired to that, and our movement has always fought to preserve time for family, preserve time at home, for rest and for what you will. And I think it's really about time that we put that demand back on the table, that we need to reduce the number of working hours. As you said, productivity has skyrocketed. There are climate implications as well. If you listen to the economists who've studied this and how climate and the economy intersect, there's reasons to believe that working less is actually good for the environment. And beyond the fact that it's good for our social development, it's good for our families, it's good for our communities. And just to put some numbers to it, from 1948 through 1979, productivity and compensation were, around the same, right? There was a little difference, but they both rose at about the same rates. But from 1979 to 2021, productivity and compensation totally took off at different rates, right? Productivity increased over the last few decades, 64.6%. Hourly pay only increased 17.3%, right? So productivity has grown 3.7 times more than our pay. All right. And so that is just to put some numbers to what you're expressing here, that productivity has increased. We as working people have not seen that value. That value has been collected by the top. And it's about time that we get some of that back. And I say we get some of our time back because so many folks are out here working more than 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
And we have to reset the standard for our lives and for our living conditions and our working conditions. We got to reset the standards. Too many people are working 50, 60 hours a week. Too many people are having to combine multiple jobs and work 50, 60 hours a week, right? They're not even getting overtime pay. They're still draining that much of their life, and they're not even getting the overtime premium.
Yeah.
So many people are working in jobs where, yeah, they get time and a half, but what if they had a union and could get double time?
Yeah.
What if they could have premiums, for over 8 hours in one day, or premiums for working after midnight? And, those are the kinds of things that a union can provide you. So, really appreciate some of the demands being brought out, and just wishing all the best for UAW in these negotiations, and, hoping that the members can organize and really push to get the best kind of contract possible.
Absolutely. And that, that differential, 64% increase in productivity, 17% increase in wages. That differential, that is not, it's just important to understand that value is not lost, right? It is out there. It is real. It's just not being taken by us, by the people who create, who produce, by the people who make, by the people who do. It's being taken by the people who own. That's the question is not, does this money get created? Does this value get created? Does somebody go home with extra money from this extra productivity? That's not the question. That money is there. It is being created. That value is being created. That profit is being created. The only question is who gets it? Who gets it? And right now, it's the people at the top, the people who are making money off of money, not the people who are making money off of labor. That's who's taking it. And so, really excited about the UAW and the Teamsters trying to take it back. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.